Hi everyone. Thanks so much, Armina. And lovely to see you all. You're mostly this side, so I'll sort of position myself here mainly. But yeah, really lovely to be here as always. The show's looking fabulous as ever, and fun to come out and share some thoughts. So I'm Jack, head of trends at Insider Trends. We're a retail consultancy, but who isn't a retail consultant, honestly? To be more precise, what I do is I go around the world looking at stores, examining retailers big and small, and trying to find the commonalities, the trends, the differences, the things that really stand out to me in what's happening in what is a increasingly complex retail world, whatever kind of business you run. So I'm really trying to pick out the things that I think maybe aren't being spotted as much en masse as they could be, and making them relevant whether you're someone who's just started your business or whether you're working for a business that's 200 years old with 1,000 stores around the world. That's the idea. So I'm pitching kind of big macro trends, consumer and retail, all around the world. Today, sourcing and storytelling, why stories matter more than ever. But I'm going to start with some consumer trends and some retail industry trends that I think are really relevant to why storytelling is so important. So yes, I work with brands like this, going around the world talking about retail in this kind of a fashion. So I want to start, I'm just going to do literally 5 minutes on a couple of consumer things that are global, have been kind of well established for the last couple of years, but I think are really fundamental to any conversation about retail. So a couple of things I often share, but I think are really important. So firstly, polarized spending. Let me explain what I mean by that. This is happening in all industries, all countries, near enough all around the world. On one hand, and I've used these stats for a while now because they're always the same. And everywhere you'll look, you'll see similar things, similar versions. Statistics that reflect the idea that people are cautious in their spending. 69% of consumers planning to cut back on non-essentials, 71% looking for sale items when shopping. These might go up and down a little here or there, but fundamentally, we still live in the world where the majority of consumers are focused on price. Majority of consumers are trying to save money as much as possible. So that's sort of fundamental. There's another side to this that I always talk about, that I think is regularly overlooked, however, and that is that often the same consumer that's very focused on price regularly splurges on luxury items, in many cases items they can't really afford. This is a pattern we see everywhere. 26% of consumers spend the same on luxury as non-essentials. This 25% has been the same the last 2 or 3 years. It was even higher during COVID. But essentially what you're looking at is someone who is careful throughout the month, and then at the end of the month, completely blows all that caution away by buying things they can't really afford. If you want further proof of that happening, just look at debt levels among young people all over the developed world. Off the charts. Look at buy now, pay later services like Klarna. These are becoming some of the most profitable businesses in the world. In my view, very unethical businesses, but effectively what they're doing is funding a person who can't afford items but buys them anyway. All these luxury brands focused on Gen Z, they're being funded effectively by debt. But also, if we remove that and we look at a more fundamental level, what does this say about consumers? It's that we are globally, en masse, people who seem to be, yes, price conscious, but at the same time, strangely comfortable with the idea of splurging. And this happens everywhere. Anyone who runs any kind of retail business, I think, has to have this in mind. You are very rarely just selling to someone that only cares about price. Very rarely. And actually, in the future, I think luxury and quality, those kinds of premium sectors, you really have to think about what someone who mostly is very cautious in their spending wants and how you actually bring them in, because they are interested in luxury. Even if they can't afford it, they are interested. Now, to kind of broaden this out a bit, let's focus on this price idea and how it's playing out with a couple of examples. Everyone here, I'm sure, would be familiar with Temu. If you aren't, Temu is one of the world's fastest growing retailers. The 3 fastest growing retailers pretty much in the world are Temu, Shein, and TikTok Shop. How strange is that? What they all have in common is they aren't really retailers. They're strange online marketplaces selling everything and everything. Most of retail growth, new growth in the US, which is always a bellwether for everything around the world, is coming from those 3 businesses. Now, Temu are very significant in the home and gift world, really, because Temu sell everything. Everything. So, when people think about competitors, Temu's a competitor to everyone because they will sell anything to anyone. That's kind of the business model. 13 million sellers on its marketplace, 100 million users, ridiculous growth in stats. Also, what's always interesting, just to give you an idea of how important price is to the Temu consumer, look at the delivery time, between 6 and 20 days. People are so focused on saving money with Temu that they're willing to wait 2 weeks for whatever, let's be frank, whatever random crap they've ordered within their marketplace. Someone asked me that recently. What did Temu sell? I said it's crap, basically. A broad assortment of nonsense. But that is a significant thing to share here, that they're so cheap, people will wait 2 weeks for those items to come. So again, thinking about polarized spending, this is just how focused people are on saving money. They will save 50 pence and wait 2 weeks for some small item. It's an extreme example, but it's there. Shein the same. But again, I was talking a moment ago about maybe someone that will spend most of their time being cautious and then splurge once a month. This is a brand called Kith. I could have picked lots of brands. Kith are the kind of brand that focuses on Gen Z, sells good quality items, but will sell, for example, a jumper for £250, quite comfortably. They don't call themselves a luxury brand, but they have luxury prices. Gen Z love Kith. Kith are kind of at the heart of cool and coolness among Gen Z. And they are opening stores like this. This is in Paris. This store gives a traditional luxury store like Gucci a run for its money. It is beautiful. And this is a Gen Z-focused upstart opening a store in a former Parisian hotel that's 300 years old. It's a stunning space. And you're in there thinking, how can a young brand that we barely know open a space like this? But it's because they're selling jumpers for £250. The key point here is, a lot of research has been done showing that brands like Kith, they're selling items to young customers who are also shopping with Temu and Shein. Often it's the same shopper. And this blows people's minds. I think, how can someone who spends £250 on a jumper also spend £3 on 2 T-shirts from Shein and wait 2.5 weeks, and they turn up ripped and there's no customer service to get it replaced? That doesn't make sense, but that is the reality. Sometimes this is one and the same. That's how polarized things are. It's really, really important, I think, for anyone thinking about the future of retail, to have in mind how polarized it is. You can't just think, if you're focused on being about value for money and price, you have to be very cautious about alienating people who want quality. Equally, if you're focused on quality, you have to think about the fact that everyone's so cost conscious. I don't think you can pin completely to one or the other. Somehow you have to appeal to both of those senses, because they are at the heart of everything that's happening in retail. Now, another part of, I think, what's really shaping consumers and how they're behaving is choice. Choice, again, brings us back to Shein, TikTok Marketplace, Temu, Amazon, all of the biggest retail players. They tend to win because they offer more choice than anyone else. All products brought to your door. But there's a complicated kind of double-edged sword to this choice thing. 87% of customers begin product searches online. Online offers us infinite choice. As a result, customers feel overwhelmed by choice. Lots of surveys are saying similar things. Again, this is polarized and complex to deal with. Most big retailers will tell you the future is about broadening your product ranges. Offer as many things as you can to as many people as you can. But we're hearing from consumers all the time that they are feeling overwhelmed with choice. It's too much, and they actually want retailers to help them. They want a curated selection. These two things are colliding. It's very hard to know which is the right way to go, but customers are overwhelmed. It's no surprise they're overwhelmed. Shein, the fast fashion brand, like almost a sister company in some respects of Temu, they offer between 2,000 and 10,000 new styles every day, 30 times more than any competitor. It's mind-blowing. To give you a sense of what Shein are doing, they use artificial intelligence to scan the internet, look at product designs, and automatically generate new designs from those images. When you look at their clothing on the app, sometimes you're looking at products that don't yet exist. You're looking at an image. If enough people click on it, then the factory makes it. That's the kind of retail world that we're starting to enter. AI can speed it up so much that you're buying products or browsing products that don't yet exist, but they can make them so quickly that that's a reasonable business model. But from a choice point of view, this is ridiculous. Okay, none of us can compute with everything else going on in our lives, this infinite choice, and yet we do, and Shein are very successful. This has opened up another side of retail that I think is really, really, really important, and frankly, I think most people here probably should be thinking about, right? Because most of us aren't billion-dollar Chinese or Indian business people with the power to overtake an entire industry. Most of us run normal businesses. And this is the other side. So this is Wolf and Badger, a kind of niche department store that focuses on small makers. Actually, if any of you are smaller producers, Wolf and Badger are a great marketplace. That's gone to my home screen, so I'll go back to it. So what Wolf and Badger do, they're a kind of department store for smaller niche brands. And I love this quote from their CEO recently. "We can't and don't want to compete on range, so have doubled down on curation. And as we've reduced the number of products online, our revenue and profit has grown. The less product we showcase, the better everything sells." Wolf and Badger, a department store, quite a reasonably big business. They're doing better by offering less. They're one of many examples I'm seeing. And I think that is the other side of Shein and Temu and everyone else, actually curation. And I'll come back to that. Curation is a massive growth opportunity. Because unless you're going to offer every product in the world and 2,000 styles a day like Shein, don't waste your time with that. The goal is how can you curate a selection of the best products that you can curate for exactly the right customer. That, to me, is the future for everyone else. Finally, in terms of what hopefully you can see is a slightly overwhelmed and a very complicated consumer, is the fact that all this is happening as well. There's more brands, more channels, and more artificial intelligence. Let me just sum that up in a simple way. This data shows you the percentage of customers shopping with more retailers than they did 5 years ago by retail category. Okay, you can almost forget it. This is in plain English. What this shows you is for everything we buy, every year there are more brands. So if you're shopping for beauty brands, there are more brands, and we find more brands. This happens because of online. This changed during COVID. We were sat at home, and all of a sudden, brand and product discovery happened online for all of us. That changed everything. So now, whatever we're buying, we shop with more brands. Whether we're buying with all those brands or not, suddenly, every retailer, every brand has more competitors. That's a great opportunity for new retailers, a massive threat and challenge for traditional ones. Simple as that. So more brands across the board. That is being supercharged by new kinds of businesses who are making it easier for anyone to launch a brand. This is Pietra, who are becoming a kind of billion-dollar business. And what they do is they go to people with a following around the world. So say there's a beauty expert on Instagram with 20,000 followers. Pietra say, do you want to launch a business? We can do it for you. We'll do everything. We'll take 10% of the commission. All you have to do is just talk about it on your Instagram. We'll do everything else. We'll launch the website. We'll create the brand. We'll white label the products. We'll do the logistics. We will do everything. That's why on Instagram you'll see people who are kind of really respected experts. 2 months later, they have their own brand, and you think, how did they do that so quickly? It's why all kinds of, maybe influencers can do it in a bigger way, but this is fascinating because it means anyone with any kind of a following or minimal expertise can just launch a brand. So this is supercharging the creation of brands as well. This is why competition has never been higher. Then we also have how many more channels. Channels, I simply mean, are different ways of talking to or selling to customers. It's an obvious point to make, but we forget it. There are more ways that we talk to people. The average customer interacts with a brand across 20 different channels. So more brands, more channels, and as a result, and what I'm trying to show you with these slides here, is you have a kind of retail world that is screaming at customers for attention. We all feel that, I would imagine. Whether it's online or offline, adverts, shops, everything. I mean, we can't have an experience without, whether it's at the supermarket or whether it's, shopping for anything, ads are thrown at us. And brands are desperately trying to scream at us to say, we're more than just a brand that's selling you stuff. Okay, we're about diversity and we're about the future and we're about young people or we're about older people. But this is why this is happening. It's because it's getting harder to get attention from anyone. And the harder that gets, the more brands are shouting. It's my firm belief that therefore probably the future opportunities aren't just following this. It can't just be this endless race and battle over eyeballs and attention. We can't just keep screaming at everyone. It can't be. And the final point is coming back to this idea of artificial intelligence. I've given you just one example here, but this is called the Yes. And the Yes are essentially, it's a kind of third-party bit of technology, but lots of brands are white labeling and using this. And the idea is, in a couple of minutes, you put some information into this app, and it will tell you the products that it thinks you will like. And within a couple of days, the recommendations are better than you could get anywhere else. So it's basically predictive AI, making sure you never even need to think for inspiration around what you buy. Very powerful predictive AI used by so many retailers around the world. It made me think of this that I saw. 70% of Netflix consumption is now based on AI recommendations rather than users' direct searches. And this is happening in retail now. So brands are not really thinking about what they recommend. That process is being outsourced and automated. Long story short, it's just more content. It's more stuff, more brands, more information given to customers. I really firmly believe that that isn't just an endless thing that we can exploit forever. Okay? We are still, at the end of the day, human beings. We all have lives outside of whatever we do in terms of consumption and commercial stuff. Customers are drowning, and there's a little corner of retail, and you can leave that to Shein and those companies where you can continue to drown them. Then I think there's everything else. And to come to that everything else bit, which is really the rest of my my presentation. It's just frozen, but I'll see if I can. Sorry, could you just help? The slide is stuck. I don't know why. Thank you. Thanks. And just to give you, I wanted to give a kind of real-world example of how this is playing out. A lot of these themes I've been talking about, choice over curation and how things are changing. These are two websites that have had very different experiences in the recent past. Matches Fashion, an online marketplace, and on the right is Shein. So, you know, most e-com designers, online designers, retail people would say the website on the left is much better than the one on the right. It's actually more pleasant, it's more curated, it's got nice explanations of everything, and you aren't constantly being followed and targeted with adverts and discounts and stuff screaming at you, right? But the reality is that Matches on the left went into administration and have struggled, and Shein is near enough the most visited, most used app or e-commerce website in the world. This has died and this is thriving. And so, despite of so much of what I'm saying, the reality is there is no easy answer. I have an opinion, but there's no easy answer to this problem, because actually drowning customers with deals and choices and using AI to optimize that, it does work, and it is working. Whether there's longevity in it, I don't know. The products aren't good, the customer service isn't good, the story isn't good. So I don't necessarily believe there's a long-term future in all of this. But we can't ignore the fact that this is growing exponentially, and a very similar business that was trying to do curation, trying to do product storytelling, trying to source quality products, trying to charge more to allow for more investment in quality products and supply chain, they failed. I share this because a lot of what I'm saying is still biased, and in reality, you know, I might have my feeling, but the reality is that AI and this kind of drowning customers in choice, it does work to some degree and it can't be ignored. But what I wanted to share now, and I'm going to start talking about brands around the world that I really love and that I'm seeing for different reasons. There is no question that there are so many brands who are choosing a different kind of retail to the Shein, TikTok Shop, Amazon, Temu environment. And there's a great future in a lot of that, and I'm going to give you loads of examples. And just to start us with, I think at the heart of all of these brands always, the commonality always, is that they have a story, because I feel like that's probably one of the only things they know they can really stick their flag in the ground and position themselves against. Because I remember someone once said to me, people don't shop at Amazon because they like Amazon. They shop at Amazon because it's convenient, because of any number of reasons. No one loves Amazon. I doubt there's a customer in the world that loves Amazon. Maybe they like Amazon because it's convenient. But then there's all these brands where, you know, position themselves against Amazon, and they're trying to catch up with them or beat them on speed or beat them on convenience or whatever else. Actually, I think that the future for everyone else is about what is in your business that's different. What is in your business that's meaningful, that is going to grab hold of the heart and soul of different customers. And the good news is there are so many of these businesses, big and small, who are doing this and successfully. So I'm going to start with a few before I start to talk about storytelling specifically and how some of the best brands are doing it. I'm trying to think about new examples recently. The beauty industry is one of the best examples of where customers are overwhelmed. So there is no industry in the world that has a faster kind of rate of growth than beauty in terms of new entrants, in terms of product sales. If you want to find a saturated market all around the developed world, it is beauty. For many reasons, but it's the easiest market to enter. I was talking about influencers earlier and setting up businesses. beauty industry is so easy to just white label another product. You look at a business like Glossier, and actually the product isn't very good, and it doesn't matter because they have the following and they sell them whatever beauty products they want to. So I was looking at the beauty industry, and I realized even there, where customers are absolutely overwhelmed with choice, there are businesses doing it differently and winning. Trini London, founded by the famous Trini, and many of us will know, who's hilarious, founded in 2017, and they kind of weren't really going anywhere. And in the last couple of years, they've absolutely boomed. No one's really talking about them. One of the reasons no one's talking about them is because they're doing things absolutely differently to everyone. So, what are they doing? Firstly, which sounds like an obvious thing, no one in the beauty industry, and actually in fashion industry and a lot of industries, talk to older consumers. They talk to young consumers. All their branding, all their marketing is focused on young people. There's so many reasons that I always find that confusing, namely, generally speaking, older generations in the West have much more money than younger people. That's one of the most important things to say. But regardless of any of that, beauty industry is massively biased. So the first thing Trini did, which works, is focusing on an older consumer, but also doing it in a way that still feels fun. So not branding it in a kind of beige way and going, yeah, you know, we know that you guys don't like stuff as bright and colourful. Nonsense. They've pitched it like they would to a younger person, but focus on an older consumer. And it's working really well. What else do? They focus on service and story over selling. So many beauty brands are just focused on price, either low or high. Luxury beauty brands go incredibly high, and then everyone else is just offering cheap products. Trini have said no. Their prices are actually fairly expensive most of the time, but they talk about story, they talk about supporting customers. They focus relentlessly on the idea that the beauty you're buying into a brand that cares about a different demographic, that thinks that businesses should still show some love and excitement to a customer that's over the age of 50. And it's a real gap that they found. What else? Curation over choice. Trini, even though it's online first, they only have a couple of stores and they sell concessions in department stores. Trini have decided, no, we're not going to offer infinite choice. We're going to offer a fairly small selection of products that we're going to really focus on. We're going to make these products the heroes of our business. Really small product selection. If you go to, they're in Liberties in Carnaby Street in London. Beautiful small selection. And they're selling better than almost any Liberty beauty brand in there. Small product selection online or offline. And finally, going back to what I was saying at the beginning, polarized pricing. It's not just they're expensive. Actually, they have some cheap products. Everyone else in the beauty industry that I see in most industries, they build a business model focused around an idea of who their customer is, and then they go, right, that's the price point. It's cheap, or it's high, or it's somewhere in the middle. Trini will offer quite a few entry-level price points, and they have certain products that are like £100 from nowhere. They sell really, really well because they figured out once a customer loves you, they've seen the data, they see that people who don't have big budgets will spend on luxury items, and they'll suddenly charge them 3-4 times more than they had before, and they all buy the same products again. The expensive products sell just as well as the cheap products. Because once you've got the customer, once you've got loyalty, it doesn't matter what you charge. There are infinite numbers of retailers doing this at the moment, and I would say this is another big thing we're tracking at Insider Trends. Polarization of pricing. You don't have to pin yourself to one price point. You don't lose the customer if you're cheap and suddenly you have a few expensive products. If the customer loves you, they'll go to that place with you. You tell them the product's better, they'll spend it once you've got them hooked. So brands doing things differently. Let me give you another example in a completely different sector. So in supermarkets, grocery, so this is in the US, Trader Joe's. Supermarkets now, 90% of the grocery world is talking about technology. It's all about self-checkout. It's all about artificial intelligence. It's all about retail media. I don't know if you've ever heard of retail media, but it's basically the idea of in-stores or online advertising to people while they're trying to do their grocery shopping. More advertising, like that's what we need. But most groceries, Tesco, Walmart, everyone, Carrefour, the future is technology, speeding up stores, making them more automated, yada, yada, yada. Trader Joe's are the fastest growing supermarket in the US. And they are like a supermarket from the 1970s. No technology. 550 stores. Let me tell you some really weird things about Trader Joe's that I absolutely love. Every single store, and bear in mind, these are like the biggest supermarkets you'd see in the UK. These are big stores. They aren't niche stores, all over the US. Each one of them has an in-house artist whose job exclusively is to go around and paint signs and change them weekly, hand draw and hand paint signs, and hand write every single price label. So think of a supermarket in the UK that has handwritten, maybe your local deli or something, maybe. every single, and they're huge supermarkets, every single one, and you'll see them sometimes in the store, pulling out the little sign and handwriting it. And in each store, the font, the handwriting is slightly different because it's a human being. Of course, it's a bit different. So they have brand guidelines that they go around and try to follow, but sometimes it's a bit wrong. And customers love that because it's a person. You know, handwriting is an expression of human behavior and characteristic. I cannot tell you the magic of going into a Trader Joe's in the US because of that. Because this ordinary grocery shop becomes much more, and it's about people. You go to the checkout, and they genuinely have found really old 1980s tills. Big mahogany desks that they're put on. Everything is analog. And this is the fastest growing supermarket in the US. They're doing incredibly well. Now, there are other, don't get me wrong, they're a super smart business. There's other reasons they're doing it. They do a lot of own label to make more profit on those products. So there's more to it than just this. But again, they're showing that you can create a story that's totally different to everyone else. You don't have to just assume that the future of retail is just about somehow trying to create a worse version of what all of these technology giants are doing. No, it's pointless trying to follow that. You have to create your own path. And that's what Trader Joe's are doing successfully. And finally, I wanted to mention Uniqlo as well, because they are a business, interestingly, that yes, they use technology, but they also have focused on story more than anything else in a market segment that is becoming very difficult. Mass market fast fashion has been, or is literally being annihilated by Shein. Temu are moving into fashion, TikTok shop. Those digital marketplaces are ripping apart those industries for the big mass market players. So what have Uniqlo done? Because Uniqlo are actually one of the fastest growing fast fashion brands in the world. What did they do? They chose a completely different path. If you look at all of their new stores around Europe and around the world now, they look like this. They don't look like any fast fashion store you've ever seen. They've decided we're going to open beautiful stores that look like luxury stores. We're going to go the other way. If most fast fashion is about seeming cheap and being cheap and just getting cheap stuff as quickly as possible to people, we'll go the other way. We're going to be the fast fashion business that feels luxury and premium. In fact, that's the genius of Uniqlo, really, is that they're a fast fashion brand, and most customers and buyers of Uniqlo don't really think of them as being a fast fashion brand. People pair Uniqlo with luxury brands all the time. But they focused on story. They focused on an idea of Japanese quality and heritage over this kind of automation and digitization of the industry. And it's worked really, really, really well. And again, they're a great example of positioning yourself in a different place. Now, for the last little part of this presentation, I want to just show a few examples of brands around the world who I think are great at storytelling. So these are brands big and small. They do it through stores, through products, through branding, marketing. But they do it in different ways. I've got a few examples, and I want to first talk about what I call culture-led stories. What I mean by this is brands who really are trying to bring genuine creativity, artistry, and culture into their retail environments, and how they do it really successfully. I always talk about Gentle Monster. They're my favorite example of kind of culture-led storytelling. Gentle Monster are a brand that sells glasses and sunglasses, and they have the most bizarre stores you'll ever see everywhere. Even their concessions in stores like Selfridges are the most bizarre. Why do they do it? Because they're so obsessed with brand and story. They think that's what is the future of their business. So they allow the selling to happen in other businesses and online. They don't care about that. Their stores are literally expressions of the Gentle Monster story, and the Gentle Monster story is imagination, artistry. So all of these stores are completely different, and every single one is designed by an artist, not a store designer. That's how committed they are to the idea of storytelling in its purest form. They sell glasses and sunglasses for, $300-400. They're not necessarily a luxury maker. They're premium. But they're really, really successful. They're successful all around the world. And their number one focus in everything they do is how do we communicate our very kind of eccentric and unusual brand story. How do we do that? And they're reaping the benefits with that approach. Thinking of other brands, I was thinking about other brands that I think lead with culture. Huckberry have always been one of my favorites. So Huckberry sell clothes and shoes. In many ways, they're an unremarkable brand. But online and offline, next to every section of products, they merchandise and help customers visualize, not around the product, but around all the things that that product is associated with. So when they're selling jackets, they have parts of their store and online that is everything about motorbiking. And certain shirts and jumpers, they've decided, are perfectly associated with reading and books. So they have a part of the store that will have coffee, beautiful armchairs, and candles and everything they think associated with that product. They work so hard that everywhere, in store and online, becomes a series of almost different moments, different places. The product is entirely secondary. It's all story, and the story is always about the culture around the product. Lots of brands do this, but it's about commitment, and to me, Huckberry are a great example who just continue to commit to that completely. And I think it's been at the heart of how they've carried on being a reasonably successful retailer. And finally, what I want to talk about is how, if you focus on culture-led storytelling, you can take your brand into really, really interesting places. So the first slide I showed you there was Madewell and Backdrop. Madewell make jeans, Backwell make paint. They did a collaboration because they realized we have the same customers. Our customers might want to buy some paint at some point. So basically, Backdrop, the paint company, made a special range of overalls for painting with Madewell. A really unusual collaboration, but it did incredibly well because they tapped into the idea of culture, of place, of identity, of being. And I'm giving you other examples here. Made years ago started appearing in airports because they realized, and certain parts of certain airports, because they understood there's a kind of customer here that loves our furniture, and we're just going to put it in unusual places. And the London Mural Festival, all of a sudden I saw brands actually advertising in kind of street art and creative spaces. It's the fact that when you have culture-led stories, you're not just confined to a boring e-commerce environment or a boring store environment. You can turn up within the culture in all kinds of interesting places, which really drives loyalty and drives kind of long-lasting love for your brand. I want to touch now on community-led stories. So these are stories for me, big and small brands who are great and still great at really focusing on the people that love them most and what matters to those people, those particularly loyal customers. John Lewis have had their struggles over the years, and we all know well about them. But I still share all the time, I think one of the best examples of a big retailer focusing well on community is what they do with nursery. There are very few parents you'll ever meet in the UK who don't at some point use the John Lewis nursery. Because completely for free, you get 2 hours, maybe before you've had your first child, you get 2 hours with someone to explain to you in that incredibly stressful, overwhelming time what kind of buggy you should use and how you get a kid into a car seat and actually what car seat you should buy in the first 9 months and all the strange things that no one really tells you in that incredibly overwhelming period of your life. John Lewis just do that. People forget this isn't a paid-for service. They just do it hoping that maybe the customer will eventually buy something from them. John Lewis do this constantly. In fact, it's been part of their problem. John Lewis is one of the most damaged brands for supporting customers and the customer going and buying something somewhere else. In reality, John Lewis is a much-loved brand that have fallen foul to people buying cheaper items in other places. But from a community point of view, it's an amazing example of actually thinking beyond the product and thinking about the community and how to make that meaningful. Rafa are one of my favorite brands, and I always share them because they are an entirely community-focused brand. So Rafa sell cycling tops and trousers and shorts. That's actually it. But people who love Rafa think of them as being so much more than that because all around the world, online and offline, they have Rafa cycle clubs. These are in most major cities all around the world. You'll get a few thousand Rafa fans. Sometimes they have physical stores they call clubs. And the idea is those customers come and hang out in the space. They don't try to sell product. They can buy coffee. They start and finish bike races there. They have a beer and watch the Tour de France when the shop closes. It's a clubhouse in the purest sense. It's an understanding that a lot of people, a lot of men, typically in their 40s and 50s, want to be part of a community, that there's something missing in their life, and they hang out with Rafa fans all around the world. They buy memberships for Rafa stores and Rafa cycle clubs. Entirely focused on the community here, and actually the story becomes as much about the shoppers, the customers, as it does about the brand, because the customers sell to each other. So I think they're such a good example of that. Maisonette in the US are a brand that sells exclusively online, but their community is parents looking for nursery furniture and items. Their genius is that they focus almost entirely on content. They've become a kind of magazine for mums and dads who are affluent and really interested in buying great nursery items and furniture. Their customers don't think of them as a retailer. They literally don't. They think of it as an online magazine. And yet, by definition, Maisonette are a retailer. Their main goal is selling stuff to these people. But from the beginning, they focused entirely on great articles, great interviews, videos, events, everything that community of people wanted. Information, ideas, creativity. Selling is secondary. really, really important thing in the future of retail is blending content and commerce. Maisonette, a brilliant example. You can give really useful stuff to your audience. Selling becomes much easier. And finally, I wanted to just say that this is happening at the retail level in some really remarkable ways. So this is Lyko. Lyko are a Scandinavian beauty retailer. Think of Boots, really. This is like a Scandinavian Boots, but honestly, so much better, so much bolder, so much more successful. They're growing rapidly. But Lyko have this extraordinary levels of kind of loyalty, and it's because all of their stores are focused on what young people who are interested in beauty products actually want to do. So, Boots might occasionally do something where they say, we've got an influencer in store today or whatever. Lyko, almost every single day, will have areas of the store where if you're a beauty customer, you can go and try on every product in there, but also you can have one-to-one. Imagine going into Boots and having one-to-one shopping, and you'll get that in Lyko. Imagine the kind of experiences that you only think happen in niche brands. So Lyko is all about, and they show it can happen at a retail level, all about, again, the world of that shopper, the world of that customer, not just the product and not just selling. And finally, I want to talk about, and really this is what I wanted the presentation to lead to, is heritage-led stories. And this is maybe the simplest way of telling stories, but it's so often forgotten. Just remembering how much history matters in modern retail. Something that we overlook is the fact that I spoke at the beginning about this ridiculous kind of scale of new brands being created all the time. Do you know the biggest single differentiator for most traditional brands over those new brands? The single biggest differentiator is simply they've been around for a long time. Most new brands under about $20 million revenue all around the world disappear within their first 3 years. The best thing you can do in many ways, even if you're a young brand that's only been around for 5 years, is remind people, we've been around for a while. That is an immediate sense to the customer that, okay, actually, you're not just an influencer-led, faddish thing adding to the saturation. You must be doing something because you still exist. Heritage, in some senses, is just reminding the customer we're riding this incredibly difficult wave, and actually we're lasting. And here's some examples of brands I think that do that amazingly well, and unusual brands. Karma Ayurveda is maybe the best store I've been to in the last year. I love it, and I really urge anyone to go there. It's in Notting Hill. Anyone that's interested in beauty, but also anyone that's interested in gifting, and the idea of tying in an experience to a product in gifting, which is so important. Big brands like Rituals do this. This is a smaller brand. Karma Ayurveda, when you walk in, every single person, in a way that works so beautifully, is asked if they'd like to sit down for a moment, have a chat, and they're immediately served this beautiful spiced Indian tea. Straight away, everyone has that. And they just kind of go, let's just slow down for a moment and have a chat. And it's strange, but it works almost immediately. Whatever your intention, that works. You walk around the beautiful store, and downstairs, there are 3 Indian kind of dermatological experts. And these people are often trained for 6 or 7 years. This isn't what you might get in a clinic, right? Where you'll get someone really, really great who's maybe studied some dermatology to do an assessment of your skin. This is a master of skin, a scientist, in the basement of this store. They have the same thing in Harrods, and in India, they have hundreds of stores, and this is actually part of what they do. And every person that walks in there has this experience with someone that knows your skin and everyone's skin in a way that you never could. This unbelievable expert. What happens after you've had 20 minutes with that person? You come up. Everyone buys something. Their conversion is unbelievable, because when you've had that tea, and the whole place smells incredible, and these wonderful experts tell you about all of this stuff, you buy the product. You buy the product like you're buying a souvenir at Disneyland. Every time. And it reminds me that when it comes to heritage, partly it isn't just about telling the people the history, but showing them the history. That's what Karma Ayurveda do so incredibly well. You immediately buy into it because you become part of it, you become immersed in it. Such a great example. I really urge anyone, definitely in the kind of gifting world, to have that experience and just see how good it is and how well it works. A more familiar example, but I think is really important, Dr. Martens, I think, continue to actually do well in what is one of the most difficult spaces. Hundreds of stores around the world. Footwear is inundated with new brands, and Dr. Martens keep doing well. And it's all about heritage. Every single product, even when they develop new products, they still keep telling customers about why they're still here, why people still love that product. They don't forget to tell people the story behind it. All the greats, all the famous celebrities that have worn the boot, but also the processes, the sourcing, They create transparency in the business and tell shoppers, this is why this is a great boot. It's not just what you see here. Here's the journey it's been on. Here's where it was made. Here's how long it took to make. And they also tell the staff in the stores that story, which is so important. They constantly remind the staff about that. So when they're selling, they're not just talking about, what it costs and the immediate commercial stuff. They're talking about the history. They're talking about heritage. So many traditional retailers, I think, are starting to get this in new ways as well, that actually, heritage is so important. IKEA did this breakfast in bed pop-up. It's one of my favorite pop-ups. They invited people, so, daughters and their mums and various kind of pairs of loved ones, come and lie in an IKEA bed for an hour in one of our stores and we'll serve you breakfast in bed. Such a beautiful idea. Sounds like an odd idea, but it worked really, really beautifully. They had kind of ridiculous exposure online, sold a lot of product because of it. Why did it work? Yes, it was kind of a novel idea and got lots of exposure, but also what they did is they started within this and the storytelling around it. They talked to people about Scandinavian rituals, Scandinavian sleep patterns. They made it this whole kind of educational experience about why sleep's so important and why taking time out of your everyday life and not just sleeping in your bed, but resting and enjoying it. How much IKEA, throughout their history, had been a kind of part of people's lives and people's families. They kind of romanticized and built this connection between the history of their business and almost the history of people's lives. It's such a clever way of doing that. And finally, I want to also remind that heritage can be so powerful that it can kind of help brands to reinvent and do completely new things. Liberty is quietly an incredibly innovative business, despite being this historic department store that does some really extraordinary things. Could you just click forward, guys? It's just stuck again, just so it moves just once. Thank you very much. And what they've started doing is actually realizing their heritage is so powerful, they could launch new own label products that will compete with the brilliant brands that they stock. I found out recently that Liberty Beauty products, some of their newest ranges, are outselling most of the brands they sell within Liberty. That says many things. It says Liberty are very smart. They're watching what people buy in the store and creating new products. Really, really clever. But also what it says is that people, and a lot of people buying these products, by the way, these are new products. People don't yet know how good Liberty Beauty products are, and they're very expensive. What they're really doing is they're going, Liberty have been around for 300 years. If they've made a beauty product, this is going to be great. They're buying it with a sense of that history that's built within the product. That is the gravitas that you have when you keep finding ways of telling those stories and holding on to the history. So I think it's really important. I'm going to do a quick wrap up, and then we'll have time for a couple of questions. But I guess a theme that I've been talking about all along is the idea that, thinking about the future of retail, and whether we're talking about Temu, Shein, and all these terrifying kind of online primarily forces that are shaping the future, I think we can get too much caught up in how to keep pace with them, and we don't spend enough time focusing on what you can do differently, what you do differently, and really focusing on that. And I want to really wrap up with that idea. So, low price is the focus of that world, but actually, in reality, there's this polarization of spending. People don't just want cheap product. In many cases, the low-spending customer will splurge on luxury. We have more brands, we have infinite choice, but we also have a provable demand all over the world for curation. So a lot of retail feels about creating more range, infinite choice, but customers are overwhelmed and they love curation. And as a result of artificial intelligence and the kind of prediction of what we like, and then the generative AI that just generates more of the same, we have this kind of blur of products that all look the same, blur of brands that all look the same. That creates, again, a provable desire for something different. And that really is kind of what I want you guys to take away, because, most of the retail world, I believe at the moment, are trying simply to replicate these big trends of mass choice. So Amazon are planning to launch a discount store in a bid to fend off Temu and Shein. Amazon probably had an opportunity to actually position themselves completely differently to Temu and Shein, right? It was an opportunity to say, do you know what? We're not going to do the direct-to-customer China to America thing. We're going to focus on quality, or actually we're going to be a bit more premium than them. Nope, they've just gone, do you know what? We're just going to try and do the same thing. And maybe it'll work for them because they're big enough. Then you also have, sorry guys, it's stuck again. If you just go to next slide, thank you. And you also have Walmart. Very interestingly, recently, Walmart decided in response to Temu, Shein, and Amazon
their response would be different. And it's quite interesting. They've suddenly gone for a range of American-made T-shirts that are much more expensive than their previous ones. And I think that two reasons, I think this is an interesting thing, they're trying to do things differently, but two reasons it's wrong. One, they know that they can't scale within America and keep being Walmart. It's not going to work. And actually, there's something quite cynical about this, because what it really does is says that we don't need that Chinese manufacturer. And that completely confuses the entire thing, because it makes this a kind of China versus USA idea, which it absolutely isn't. It's just as possible to have brilliant, reliable product produced in China as America. And let's be totally honest, it's infinitely more likely because they have the capacity and they know how to do it. This isn't about not having stuff made in China entirely. It's much more complicated than that, and the Walmart thing simplifies it. In reality, the future for most brands is about positioning yourself completely differently, going in a completely different direction. That's what I truly believe. Different business models, different ways of doing business. So I'm going to leave with a couple of inspiring examples that I really love. Fern, I always give a shout out to. Fern I can't even advise you to buy their products because you can't buy them. They've been so successful. So this is a subscription-based perfume business. They release 4 new perfumes a year and you buy a subscription to it. Lots of people do it as a gift. It's not ridiculously expensive. I think it's about 100 to 150 pounds for the 4 perfumes. And they have a long waiting list because there's only so many perfumes they can make a year. This is all story, all quality. These perfumes are made in Cornwall in a beautiful space that you can visit. Once you buy the subscription, you can go down and see them. Lots of people do because it's an amazing experience. And their problem is scalability. And in fact, they won't scale because then it changes who they are. But they could probably be 10 times bigger. That's how big their waiting list is. Incredibly successful. And maybe this raises bigger questions about what we want as retailers and businesses, about the ideas of slow growth, about whether the future is more about those bigger conversations. The elephant in the room is often growth. But there is another way, and Fern are a good example of it. And finally, thank you. Finally, I wanted to mention this really unusual brand. You can see they're unusual from the fact that this opening video on their website has naked people. Flamingo Estate, I talk about a lot. And I think they're so relevant to home and gift, and particularly gift. I couldn't tell you what Flamingo Estate sell because there is no pattern. This is an online brand who you're told are a group of beautiful Californian people that make all products on a massive, beautiful farm in California. That's the brand. And they create all these lovely videos, and they've created this amazing story, community about the way they make products. But there's not a lot of pattern to the new products they release. Basically, they're all gifts. And their best-selling product are these dried strawberries. These jars of dried strawberries sell for $80 each. They're tiny. Most people don't even buy them. They sell tens of thousands of these every year. Now, there's two sides to this. On the one hand, most people go, that's just ridiculous. I don't even know how that works. And it's easy to have that view. The other view is, this is storytelling. Their storytelling is so good, so powerful, so kind of transcending to the people that love these products, that these people will buy any product they sell to them. There is no pattern to what they sell. They just have the following and they have the story, and then they can sell whatever products they want. And the products are exceptionally good quality because they can then invest in them. And every time they have a new kind of investment round, they spend that money on making incredibly good products. And it doesn't matter what the products are. And I wanted to finish on that because I think when it comes to storytelling, Flamingo Estate are almost an example of the fact that if your story is good enough, in a sense, the product and the brand doesn't even matter. You could sell anything to anyone if people fall in love with what you do. Thanks so much for your attention. I think I've got time for questions now, but I appreciate it so much. Thanks. Yeah, and just if anyone has, it's small enough, if anyone has a question, just pop up your hand, and I'm happy to just, and if not, I'm totally happy to take it as total agreement with everything. Equally, if you want to just talk to me at the end, privately, that's totally cool as well. Brilliant. Lovely. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your show.